Energy and Natural Resources, and we're going to hear from our first-time sponsor of SB 590, and you are recognized, Senator.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10, and I am here to introduce Senate Bill 590 relative to electric aggregation plans. This bill came to me at the request of one of my constituent communities, the town of Peterborough, working in partnership with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. The goal of SB 90 is simple and practical: to give municipalities a clearer, more flexible way to reinvest non-tax revenues from their electric aggregation programs back into local energy solutions that will help lower costs for residents and businesses. This bill allows a town with an approved electric aggregation plan to set up a revolving fund using a tool that municipalities already know and use to support energy services like energy efficiency, weatherization, demand reduction programs, or local energy projects. These kinds of investments that can reduce energy bills and ease strain on the electric system at a time when it is needed most. More importantly, 590 does not expand municipal authority, and it does not allow the use of local taxes. Municipalities already operate under the clear restrictions in existing law, and this bill works within that framework. What it does, it gives towns more flexibility to act when opportunities arise, such as matching a federal or state grant or reinvesting modest electric aggregation program revenues, rather than having to wait for the annual town meeting to appropriate funds for each and every project. And I want to be clear, I'd like to offer an amendment as well, which is 0056S. I hope you all have a copy of it. All right, sweet.
You all have a copy? Yep.
Good. All right, so my ape was on top of things. That's good. This amendment explicitly states that no funds raised from local taxes may be used in a revolving fund created for this purpose. And as you can see, you can read the language in that amendment, facilitating the provision of energy services pursuant to the approved electric aggregation plan under RSA 53E, provided that no funds raised from local taxes shall be used for such purposes. And that amendment really enforces requirements in the existing municipal and county aggregation law to prohibit those use of local taxes. So at its core, 590 is about local flexibility, fiscal responsibility, and making sure communities can responsibly take advantage of opportunities to lower energy costs for their residents without mandates and without new taxes. So thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Oh, man.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I have
Good
a
morning.
question about your amendment.
Yes.
If a municipality put its cash reserves into the public deposit investment pool,
Mm-hmm.
would they be allowed to deposit any of the returns, use any of the returns from those investments to support electric aggregation, or would that count as municipal tax revenue, even though it was investment income on tax revenue?
Thank you for the question. I would assume it would count as municipal tax revenue. However, that could be above my pay grade, and there's folks behind me that could answer that
Okay,
question for
I'll
you.
ask the municipal association if they're, I don't know if they're on the to speak list.
Who?
The Community Power Coalition will probably be able to help
Or
answer
the
that.
municipal.
We have some people.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.
You too. Representative Wendy Thomas.
Nope.
Yeah, you had it.
Okay, it's red, not green. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Representative Wendy Thomas. I represent the town of Merrimack, and I also sit on Science, Technology, and Energy in the House. I know that you already know this, but I just want to remind you that electric aggregation empowers local energy choice. There's a potential for lower energy costs, leveraging collective buying power. It expands renewable energy options. It encourages innovation and community engagement. It supports energy resilience and stability. And it keeps benefits local and voluntary because there's opt-out and opt-in. So basically, it's a good thing that delivers cost savings to ratepayers. This bill allows municipalities the financial flexibility to serve their residents and give them choices with lower cost. I'm also here to say that I believe this bill will get a very warm reception in the House.
We like nice warm receptions.
So do I.
Yeah. Are you cold? Ah. So we'll close the windows then. So with that, any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bruce Tucker? We've helped out municipalities.
Good morning, Chair
Good
and
morning.
members of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. My name is Dr. Bruce Tucker, and I'm a resident of Peterborough, New Hampshire, where I sit on the Peterborough Community Power Committee, and also I'm the member rep to the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, where I sit on 2 committees and on the board of directors. So thank you for receiving my testimony in support of SB 590. And I would like to thank Senator Benton for sponsoring this legislation. One of the powerful tools that the community power legislation, RSA 53E, gives our towns is the ability to set our own local rates, which includes a small fraction of a cent contribution to renewable energy funds. Peterborough is one of the first towns to take advantage of this, and I think is the only one continuing to do so at this time. We have many projects that we could fund, but the first one is to put solar on our new fire station that's under construction right now. There was not sufficient funds in the budget to allow the installation of the solar due to increased costs of construction. And so this use of the discretionary reserve fund is very beneficial to the town. One thing that I will say is that we talk about flexibility, but this is a good example of why the revolving trust fund allows the flexibility to benefit the taxpayers of Peterborough. And that's because when the warrant article is written next month for vote on the town at town meeting in May, that will have set what's available. But if we had had a revolving trust account, we could include all the revenues between February and when the roof is finished, about 6 months. We could have included that in our original amount used for the project. And why is that different? Because the inability to build the complete system originally means that there's a lost opportunity costs of all the energy that could have been produced, the need to issue a second RFP to complete the project with staff time, increased costs during that time. There could be a significant penalty to the town for having to wait for the annual town meeting to move funds from the discretionary reserve fund into the town account. I had more to say, but I think that in essence is the value that Peterborough taxpayers receive from moving from a discretionary reserve fund that is our current plan to the revolving trust mechanism. Happy to answer any questions. Well, I will say one more thing. Because this is based on RSA 53E, the money we're talking about is the money of the electricity costs. There's no tax money involved in this, and projects that use it are for specific projects. They're not to support, there is no mechanism by which we could apply these funds to the electric rate that we establish. That's all done outside of this process. Anyway, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Looks like you did a good job.
Thank you.
Dina Dennis and Mark Bollinger?
This is on. Good morning, Chairman Avard and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Dina Dennis. I serve as Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs for the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, also known as CPCNH. Also here with me today is Mark Bollinger, CPCNH's Director of Projects and Programs, who will be available to answer any technical questions that may come up. So just as a refresher, CPCNH is New Hampshire's only statewide joint powers agency, serving approximately 175,000 customers and nearly 70 member municipal and county community power aggregation programs. Since launching Community Power almost 3 years ago, our members have helped customers save more than $16 million on their electricity bills while reinvesting value back into their communities. CPCNH supports Senate Bill 590 FN with the clarifying amendment offered by Senator Fenton. Senate Bill 590 is a common sense housekeeping bill. As Senator Fenton mentioned, it gives municipalities a clear, familiar, and well understood tool, this revolving fund, to reinvest non-tax community power revenues into local energy services that are already authorized under state law. 3 brief points I'll make. First, Senate Bill 590 enables local innovation and cost-saving investments using non-tax dollars. Some community power programs are generating modest revenues, non-tax revenues, and those communities want to use those funds to support initiatives like efficiency, weatherization, demand response, and local energy projects, as Bruce described, that can both lower costs and reduce peak demand. For CPCNH members, this could include revenues from what we offer as discretionary rate adders, which is a voluntary rate that a member community could select, and then can be deposited into a revolving fund to support these local energy services. So this bill just provides a clear legal pathway to do that, and using a funding structure that municipalities already know how to manage. Second, the bill provides flexibility without mandates or expansions of local authority. Nothing in the bill requires a town to create a revolving fund or spend money in any particular way. Decisions remain entirely local and must align with the approved electric aggregation plan. Also of importance is it allows communities to act when opportunities arise, such as a matching grant or piloting an energy and cost-saving program. As to Bruce's point, rather than having to wait for an annual town meeting to authorize receipt of and appropriations from those funds. And then third, the amendment offered by Senator Fenton reinforces existing law and preserves legislative intent. We support the amendment clarifying that no funds raised from local taxes may be used. As the senator pointed out, that prohibition already exists in the Community Power Aggregation Act, specifically in RSA 53-E:5, which prohibits the use of taxpayer funds to capitalize or operate electric aggregation programs. And this amendment simply removes any potential ambiguity. It also preserves legislative intent to ensure that Senate Bill 590 remains a non-tax community power and grant-funded tool and nothing more. So in summary, Senate Bill 590 is a modest refinement to the community power framework. It strengthens local control. It supports innovation without mandates. It offers opportunities to lower energy costs, and it respects clear statutory authority. We ask the committee to recommend this bill ought to pass with the amendment. So thank you for your time, and we welcome any questions.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. In Nashua was the first community, I believe, to bring Community Power Coalition online. And it's become more expensive to buy electricity that way than through the utility. Could you tell us, please, how many of the communities that are participating in the program have lower costs than the utility?
Sure. So you are correct, Senator, that Nashua was one of the coalition's founding communities, and they were one of the first, I think, 10 or 12 communities that launched in the spring of 2023. CPCNH, as a matter of our board and policy, we do not launch any local aggregation program unless our rates beat whatever the local utilities rates are. So when we launched the city of Nashua and all of the other communities that have now launched programs through us, our rates were lower than the utilities. It was always envisioned as it may not always be the case. The idea and one of the goals for Community Power is to offer innovation in rates and energy and cost saving options to communities and to customers. So that might not always mean that our rates are lower than the utility rates. In an ideal world, we're looking at offering rate products and options that might have longer terms, like a 12 or 18-month term. It might have some distributed energy or demand flexibility and reduction component that compensates customers and communities for managing and lowering their energy costs at times when it's more valuable. We're still working on a few regulatory and technical barriers that prevent that kind of innovation in New Hampshire's energy market. So yes, for the time being, right now, our rates starting February 1st are higher than all three of the utilities. And that being said, there are some outstanding under collections, particularly in Liberty's territory, that have not been reconciled yet. It hasn't been approved by the Public Utilities Commission. They have about a $4.3 million balance that the commission last summer said hold off on, and we're going to do an adjudication. So if that were to be approved and start going into rates later this spring, it could mean that their rates are significantly higher than what they're going to be for this upcoming rate period.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick?
Good morning. My name is Nick Paul, Director of Legislative Affairs for Clean Energy New Hampshire. Senate Bill 590 gives municipalities with approved community power aggregation plans a simple, familiar tool to reinvest community power revenues locally into customer-facing energy solutions. It does this by authorizing towns and cities to use the revolving fund framework in RSA 3195H to support energy services allowed under RSA 53E. Three very quick points on this. First, it helps communities translate community power performance into direct local benefits in that community. If a program generates discretionary revenues, reserve adders, or attracts grant dollars, SB 590 makes it easier to reinvest those funds into measures that lower demand and reduce costs, such as energy efficiency, weatherization, and peak reduction programs. Second, it improves planning and continuity. Energy investments often require multi-year coordination. This bill gives municipalities a clean mechanism to set funds aside and deploy them when a project is ready, instead of losing momentum because dollars are hard to carry forward year to year. Third, it supports smaller towns that don't have a large staff or complex procurement capacity. This is an easy to administer approach that relies on a structure many municipalities are already have a good understanding of. And it allows them to pursue right-sized projects like local distributed generation, energy storage, and demand response programs that benefit customers and reduce strain at peak times. Finally, this bill does not mandate a program. It doesn't require spending. It doesn't create a new tax. It simply expands the list of tools available to communities that want to reinvest non-tax revenues back into energy services that are already authorized under the Community Power Law. For those reasons, we hope that the committee will adopt Senator Fenton's amendment and recommend SB 590 ought to pass with amendment. Thanks.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Chris?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Deputy Commissioner Chris Helms with the New Hampshire Department of Energy. After seeing the amendment, I was tempted to wave off. I'll just say, in bringing this consideration, we do not rate regulate the municipal aggregation programs. When I believe it was Senate Bill 286 back in 2019, and then House Bill 315 in 2021 expanded the community power programs. And obviously, Senator, you're well aware of that bill, House Bill 315, and moved into that opt-out provision rather than opting in to the community power, and that really led to the expansion that we've seen. Throughout those discussions, I think it's been a consistent legislative intent, and certainly was at the executive at the time, that there wouldn't, that folks who didn't want to participate in municipal aggregation wouldn't bear any costs associated with that. I think the amendment makes clear the intent for non-participants in municipal aggregation to not bear costs associated with that. And I think we just wanted to make sure that policy consideration was in your minds. I think this amendment seems to do that. I am not an expert in municipal finance, and I'll let you look to those policy committees on that. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank
Thank
you very much. I have nobody else wanting to speak on this, so we're going to close the hearing. Is there a motion to move into exec? So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, is there a motion on, Senator Water moves, and seconded by Senator Rosenwald?
Move amendment 0056S. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Block passes amended.
Seconded by Senator Rosenwald. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Senator Rosenwald says consent.
I'll second.
Senator Pearl said yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Who would like to take this out? Senator Waters. Is there a motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Yeah.
Actually, Senator Lang.
Senator Lang is next. Hey, this is energy.
Sometimes we're low.
Waiting on Senator,
I'm gonna go do another bill at 9:30 and I'll be back.
okay,
All right.
Senator Lang is not here. I'll introduce it. I'm sorry. Yeah, nobody had the answer to it. It'll be ferreted out, though. The House is gonna ferret it out for sure. I promise. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see why they'd be subject to a limitation. I don't see why they'd be subject to a limitation because it's not tax revenue. All right, we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 449 and recognize Senator Lang to introduce. Just snuck in the door.
Good timing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Senator Tim Lang from Senate District 2, covering the Lakes Region North. I'm before you to introduce Senate Bill 449. If this feels like Groundhog Day, because it is, this is, I think, the fourth time this bill's been in front of you, and it'll be the, if you ultimately end up getting to a yes again. Last term, we were a 5-0 on this bill and passed it. The problem we have this year is the House in its infinite wisdom IP'd this bill over. So I'm going to ask the committee to hold this bill for me. I have meetings with stakeholders to try to rework the bill to deal with the House's actions. And I guess that's it. I do have a meeting. As you know, this bill is supported by the Business and Industry Association, as well as some of the tech industries. as well as the builders themselves. So I just ask you to hold the bill. Nothing's changed since last year when we passed this bill. The language is currently the same, but I'll work on an amendment. I won't ask you guys to do that, but I'll draft an amendment working with the industry to be able to get around this issue. And that's all I have.
Senator Pearl with a question.
Senator Lang, this bill has an FN.
Yes.
Would you like us to pass it out of here and we hold it in finance?
Well, I'm going to be bringing you're welcome to do whatever you'd like to do. Again, that's a path that would work. But again, I think that the changes I'll make will be policy related, not financially related. So probably you guys want to have a say in the policy that I'm going to get amended by working with the stakeholders.
Okay.
All right, fair enough.
Yep. Questions? Well done. Nick Hall.
Hi again. Nick Paul, Director of Legislative Affairs for Clean Energy New Hampshire. I'm here to testify in support of SB 449 FN and just as importantly, to offer CNH as a resource as the committee considers any changes that are necessary to move this bill forward effectively. You've heard this version more than once, and we've heard from Senator Lang that there are going to be some changes, so I'll be very concise here. A couple reminders, and for the benefit of folks who are not on the committee the past couple years that we've been having this discussion. SB 449 is a common sense incremental step in New Hampshire's net metering framework, and it is especially important right now because the market needs a clear signal that New Hampshire intends to remain a viable place to build solar projects. A key piece of this measure is the 20-year term for new projects. A 20-year term is not special treatment. It is a standard infrastructure practice. Solar assets operate for decades and they're financed on multi-year schedules. A 20-year eligibility term is simply what allows lenders and bidders to price projects responsibly. Without a term that lines up with how infrastructure is financed, municipalities and other customers see higher financing costs, fewer competitive bids, or projects that never make it through underwriting. At a high level, these are the key points that we think matter most. First, New Hampshire's program already represents a modest market-based approach for larger projects. For arrays above 100 kWAC, the credit is essentially the default service rate, which is currently just over 11 cents in much of the state. That is a great deal lower than what surrounding states pay for similar projects. Second, because compensation is tied to the default service rate and adjusts with the market, developers are taking real market risk. That feature matters because it keeps this program anchored to competitive supply conditions rather than a fixed administrative price. Third, we really need to be candid about the stakes. You know that I've been here for 3 years. We've been talking about this for 3 years. New Hampshire's solar workforce is meaningful. The Solar Energy Industries Association reports over 1,100 solar jobs in the state. If we want those firms and workers to keep choosing New Hampshire, the policy environment has to be financeable and predictable. So our bottom line here is very simple. We support the core tenets of Senate Bill 449 because moving this forward is critical at this point in time for the market. We also recognize there may be amendments or refinements that help address concerns and improve durability, especially with an eye toward what the House will need to see when this comes over. We respectfully ask the committee to keep this bill moving, and we stand ready to work with you and Senator Lang on any changes that we need to get a strong, workable product.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you.
Mr. Elms. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Again, for the record, Deputy Commissioner Chris Elms of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. You heard us testify on this bill last year, and we obviously testified in the House when it went over there. I won't belabor that testimony. Obviously, we are, here if you need us. Looking at the bill, we do have a number of policy considerations and technical concerns that I'll just touch on briefly. This does represent a massive expansion in the eligible load in New Hampshire who could participate in net energy metering. There are questions related to equity with residential ratepayers who wouldn't be able to benefit from these programs but might incur some costs associated with it. There are cost considerations looking at the Department of Energy's Value of Distributed Energy Resources study. That did not look at resources over 1 megawatt. When that study came out in 2022, it was looking at sort of the current compensation in place at the time and proliferation at the time. It did find slight cost shifting from, that non-participants would have to bear slight increases. I can't tell you that with an expansion for a commercial industrial customer that it wouldn't, you wouldn't see cost shifting there. When we expanded the municipal host under House Bill 315 that I had mentioned before, one of the sort of the guardrails that was associated with that expansion, why I think a lot of folks were okay with it, was that to the extent that there was cost shifting, a lot of the benefits would be able to flow to municipal taxpayers, state taxpayers, so that there was, at least if there was shifting, it was still going to a broad-based group. The department has concerns with the legacy period that I think we'll go into a little bit more on the next bill, the legacy period grandfathering of 20 years. And then there are just administrative difficulties associated with the bill. We've seen a big uptick in the amount of work associated with looking at group net metering with the expansion to municipal host. Now that expanded to about 3%, I believe, of New Hampshire's load is eligible. That's, between state and county and local governments. Commercial industrial customers represent over half of the load. So we would go from 3% to well over 50 who would be potentially eligible. And what we've seen with the administration of these group host net metering arrangements are, and this is allowed under rules, and it's all okay. But folks moving sort of load throughout different groups in order to match things as closely as possible. When we're looking at that on our end, that's pretty burdensome. The utilities also have to make sure that they're following that, so we're not double counting or double compensating load. There are costs associated with that administration, and those costs are borne by ratepayers. One other technical difficulty was that the limitation, I'm just pulling it up, the limitation in section 4 on page 2, line 11 of the bill as introduced, that requires at least 33% consumption. That definition where it's attached, although that's the intention, does not actually line up with any projects, because the definition of an industrial host says that it has to be a group net metering arrangement. That definition says for those who are not a group. So that definition doesn't really do anything under our reading, or at the very least is ambiguous. So those are my considerations. Obviously, given the prime sponsor's request to hold this, happy to follow up with you.
Perfect. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joshua, on those 3 points, if you could forward those to Senator Lang so he can be working on that with his potential amendments, that'd be very helpful. Mr. Burke. Good morning.
Members of the committee, thanks for your time this morning. My name is DJ Burke. I'm here representing the Business and Industry Association, state's manufacturing association and chamber of commerce. Here to support SB 449. As Senator Lang pointed out, we've seen this bill multiple times before. BIA has always supported this concept in the past and will continue to do so in the future. As he stated as well, we know that there are some changes that are likely to be coming. We're very happy to work with the committee to find a solution there. We want to find a solution that's tenable across all parties here. As you well know, energy prices are one of the primary concerns for businesses throughout the state, especially those in the manufacturing sector. We feel that this bill will provide an option, especially for the large energy consumers in this state. If the state I think there's 2 points here that I think are important. One, this provides a direct option for businesses who consume lots of energy to address their energy needs. I think the other point that maybe isn't as direct is that passing legislation of this sort sends the message that the state is willing to address this problem, which has become so pervasive, especially, like I said, for manufacturers throughout the state. As we've seen recently with a certain large employer, energy costs are a primary driver. And when looking into the future, it really affects how businesses see the viability of manufacturing in the state long term. And when they're looking to the future and seeing if this is something that they can continue to do, energy prices are forefront in their minds often. I'll keep my comments brief here. Again, we supported this in the past. We're happy to work with the committee, like I said, and we're hopeful to find a solution. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Questions from the committee? Well done. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
have nobody else wanting to speak on this unless there's some volunteers. Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing on 449 FN. And we'll wait for the next bill and the prime sponsor.
Perfect time.
Yeah.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning.
I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 538, extending net metering eligibility terms for municipal energy projects. And as the great Yogi once said, it's like deja vu all over again. We have, since we passed House Bill 315, bipartisan bill signed by the Governor Sununu in 2021, we thought we had taken care of this, but the PUC didn't quite see the technicalities of it, and so the bill has come back, I think this time in a form that will have some favor in the House at this time too. What the HB 315 did was it lifted the 1 megawatt cap on net metering project developed by municipalities, including counties, and it set the stage for a limited number of projects to be developed in the 1 to 5 megawatt range. And what is involved with the net metering here is that it does provide over a certain amount of time a payment for that output and the projection over the years under which it has the net metering benefit has a lot to do with the financing of projects. And so what has occurred under this, because most of these standard government finance projects are built around a 20 to 25 year term. At that time in 2021, there was a tariff in place for the credit, which had been established in 2013, and we in place until 2040. So easy enough to do the math that with the time it took to get project developed and then the approval process, internet connection process, there began to be a misalignment between the expectations of the 20-year period that was in House Bill 315 and the rule, the tariff rule in place there. So what the bill does, in some lot of rather fancy language referencing earlier tariffs, it says that the period in which you can have the net metering benefit is 20 years from that project. So essentially what this does is grandfather in a set of projects that are in place and would run up against that 20-year limitation. As you see, what the bill does here is it establishes the 20-year term, references the orders there, and now says it's the period of longer than 20 years or longer, either the longer period, either 20 years or what may be allowed in subsequent tariffs. And so there's some language at the bottom of page Um, One on the top of page 2, which references that if in the future there is a new tariff structure that is set up, then these projects have an option as to whether to stick in the one they're at or to transfer into the other one. I just want to mention too that, you know, this is limited to the projects that are grandfathered under this, that came in under the tariff regime that led to this running up against the 20-year. I will mention that there are a variety of towns around the state that this would potentially affect, including Pelham, Littleton, Plainfield, Milton, Concord, Ashland, Conway, Bow, Colebrook, Stratford, Farmington, and Hudson. So these projects are important to these communities. They'll be able to save some money for their residents, and I hope that in this form that we'll finally be able to get this grandfathering done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Chris Elms.
Thank you for having me back, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Deputy Commissioner Chris Elms, the Department of Energy. The department is neutral on this bill, on Senate Bill 538. We do have some policy context that I'd like to go over with you. So as Senator Waters mentioned, this bill would guarantee that projects eligible for municipal group host net metering be able to receive the existing rate of compensation for 20 years after going online before having to transition to whatever rate is in effect at that time. This is an expansion of the current structure, which guarantees that rate for all projects through 2040. In proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission, the Department of Energy has supported the existing date certain legacy period that ends on December 31st, 2040, rather than the rolling 20-year period from when they enroll in net metering. There was disagreement in the PUC proceeding between DOE and other stakeholders. The PUC did side with DOE's position and claimed that there was little evidence that the expanded legacy period was necessary to secure investment in commercial or residential customer generator installations. You know, a rolling 20-year legacy period is a government guarantee for compensation that few, if any, businesses can count on in other industries. Such a guarantee would improve the financing terms for developers, of course, but, you know, the purpose of subsidies are to produce more favorable economic conditions, and in this case, by shifting investment risk from developers and towns to all electric ratepayers. Now, net metering itself is not intended to be a subsidy. It's intended to be fair compensation for folks. However, a guarantee of that compensation, even if it is then determined to become unfair, is a question that the legislature might want to ask itself, and whether or not that subsidy is necessary to achieve the goals that you want. By guaranteeing compensation under the existing tariff for developers, while also giving them the ability to transition to a more favorable rate in the future, you kind of create a heads I win, tails you lose proposition for the developers. You know, if you want to guarantee the revenue for the projects under this existing thing and folks then decide to build a project to move forward with it, does it make a lot of sense to let them then transfer to a better rate when it comes available, even if they were willing to build under the existing compensation structure, which they had guaranteed and you were able to de-risk? In essence, that kind of makes the proposition that the developers, if the compensation increases, they get the benefit of increased revenue, whereas if the compensation decreases, the ratepayers have borne the risk and are now paying more for something than they otherwise would if that came into effect. You know, similar to that end, although the findings of this bill indicate that the policy goal is to help municipal projects be financeable, there is no guarantee under existing municipal host net metering statutes that a substantial portion of those benefits flow to municipalities. So, you know, a developer can offer pretty limited benefits to political subdivision group members, and then they're able to keep most of the now guaranteed compensation. So, aside from those policy concerns, we do have some administrative questions here. As I mentioned on the previous bill, there are difficulties in administering these groups for the department. And a rolling legacy period of 20 years makes that even more complex because now the department has to track each project where they are in that 20-year period. As new net metering structures come in, new compensation rates come in, we have to track how much eligibility does each project have within their existing structure? Where are they, are they in net metering 2.0 or 3.0 or eventually 4.0, 5.0? There is a fair amount of difficulty there in administering it. Obviously, that's a cost for us and for the utilities who would have to track that, and those costs are borne by ratepayers. To conclude, I just want to note that net metering it doesn't go away in 2041. Simply the guarantees that folks are grandfathered into the existing structure until that time would end in 2041. At that time, whatever's in effect then is what folks would have to be compensated. If we're looking at 20 years from now, I guess I would ask the question whether or not we know better than the legislature and PUC and DOE of 2046 about what's right for the people of New Hampshire. We have seen, and I think as was mentioned, every state does this a little differently. They set different compensation rates, but we have seen throughout the affordability crisis that basically the whole country's looking at in energy prices, we have seen states start to look at rolling back what they've done on net metering. The more that is guaranteed for compensation in the future, if that future legislature determines that the current structure is not fair to ratepayers, their hands would be tied. So that is just what we want to raise. Again, we are neutral on the bill. I just want to make sure you had some of the policy considerations that would go into making this decision to override the PUC. And I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chris. So I'm glad you repeated at the end because I just wanted to reiterate that the department is neutral on this legislation.
Absolutely. The legislature can make whatever policy determination you want. And if you choose to have this policy objective, that's of course your prerogative.
Yeah. And wouldn't you agree that the legislature did choose with House Bill 315 and signed by the Governor Sununu that this policy was one that seemed to meet our goals in terms of RPS and other needs that the state identified, and we in a bipartisan way affirmed with that bill?
I would say that I did not look at House Bill 315 in the preparation for this, although I was involved with that compromise. I do not recollect that it at all contemplated the legacy period for financing these projects.
Would it be, if I may follow, wouldn't it be fair to say, though, that part of the issue here has been the difficulties at the PUC and the kind of time period delays in terms of being able to bring on projects that meant that what seemed might be administratively possible to move things along proved not to be the case? And also, as we had in some other examples as well, when the PUC makes the decision that is contrary to what we believe is legislative intent, then we have to file legislation. And so the will of the legislature really is what governs this, isn't it?
From the department's perspective, and I appreciate the question, Senator, but from our perspective, I don't think we would say that the PUC had any trouble here with the net metering. They adopted the legacy period recommendation that we had made. Basically, on the most recent net metering docket, had aligned with the department's position to maintain the existing net metering structure, which we thought was, based on the results of the VDER study, more or less, not necessarily very impactful on the cost shifting side for those under 1 megawatt resources. And as I mentioned before, there were safeguards with the municipal host side of things. But again, as I mentioned before, we view net metering as an attempt not to be a subsidy, but to be fair compensation. And so from my view, I don't see it being against the policy goals of the state that whatever the the legislature and PUC believe to be fair compensation, that ought to be what folks receive. And that if there are guarantees, that those guarantees should not result in a situation where ratepayers where it can only get worse for them. You know what I mean? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, if I may just make, I mean, wouldn't you agree that whatever the PUC may think about something, that the legislative process establishes what a policy shall be if the legislature does not agree with the PUC interpretation of something?
Yeah, absolutely. To be clear, you have the ability to do this.
Yeah. I'm good. Thank you.
Nobody else? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nick Paul?
Thank you again. Nick Paul, Director of Legislative Affairs for Clean Energy New Hampshire. Imagine walking into a bank and trying to finance a project with a 35-year lifespan and saying, don't worry, the program doesn't end in 13 years. We just have absolutely no idea what's going to happen after that. Senate Bill 538 is important because it addresses the core reason municipal and community scale solar projects are stalling in New Hampshire. Lenders will not underwrite projects without clear bankable certainty about the length of the net energy metering eligibility term. We're already seeing massive market retreat. Installers and developers are shifting work to nearby states with clearer rules. From an informal check-in with companies active here, we found that at least 274 megawatts of projects have been abandoned already, and a dozen solar companies have exited New Hampshire. To put that in context, are you wondering, are we going from 600 to 350? No, we're going from 287 to 13 megawatts of solar in the pipeline for New Hampshire. This is not just a clean energy issue, it's a local economic issue. New Hampshire's solar sector supports over 1,100 jobs, as I stated earlier. When projects disappear, those are electricians, construction crews, engineers, local supply chains that lose work and contracts. Towns lose the savings that they were counting on. Senate Bill 538 provides the clarity the market needs to function. For eligible political subdivision group net metering projects, under the Commission's alternative tariff, the bill guarantees the longer of 20 years from the first year of compensation or eligibility through January 1st, 2040. That term certainly matters because these are long-lived infrastructure projects. Municipal projects are typically financed over many years, and when there is a policy cliff in the middle of that financing period, the outcomes are predictable: higher financing costs, fewer viable bids, or projects that cannot proceed. Senate Bill 538 is not a sweeping redesign. It is not an ideological statement. It is a narrow, municipal-focused repair to a policy flaw that is right now actively pushing projects, capital, and workers out of New Hampshire. If we do not act quickly to restore bankable certainty to this process, the damage to New Hampshire's solar development ecosystem will become self-reinforcing. Fewer projects lead to fewer in-state firms, fewer skilled workers, and fewer competitive bids, which in turn makes projects more expensive and harder to execute. At that point, even good policy changes arrive too late. We cannot wait to address this issue any longer. Thank you, and I'm willing to answer any questions you have to the extent I'm able.
Questions from the committee? Waters?
In terms of generation of electricity now, would it be fair to say that solar has proven to be the cheapest across the country at this point in time?
That is demonstrably true.
Yeah. And in terms of saving municipalities money, wouldn't this be one of the few options that they can take, because it also helps lower peak demand potentially and lower the necessity for very expensive transmission projects, distribution?
Local generation necessarily acts as a hedge against price volatility and reduces transmission costs because it's close to home.
Thank you.
Thank
Could you
you.
repeat that statement again, please?
Local generation necessarily reduces transmission costs because it's close to home.
What I thought you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Monahan with the DuPont Group, and I'm wearing a couple of hats today, including here on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Counties, as well as some of the energy firms I work with, including Kearsarge Energy and Revision. I have letters from the New Hampshire Association of Counties, all 10 counties supporting the bill, and a sign-on letter which is growing over time with support from the town of Hudson, the Hooksett Village Water District Precinct, and Berlin Waterworks. The town of Hampton will be signing on to this, and I believe the town of Conway as well. As Senator Waters indicated, this is legislation designed to create alignment between what the legislature did in 2021 with Senate Bill 313 and the realities of what's taking place in trying to move forward with a limited number of projects. What we're hoping to do with this bill is avoid falling into the net metering wars and trying to find a practical solution to projects which are in a pipeline. We will certainly be willing to work with the folks at the Department of Energy to help them better understand it. But I did want to take a moment to just talk about some of the things that have come up in the hearing today, and in order for the committee to understand that we're really looking for a practical solution for a handful of projects which are in the pipeline. So that's a context for what we're trying to do. We're not trying to relitigate Senate Bill 106 or Senator Lang's bill, which we heard before. I think those are terrific bills. I want to work with the process, but we're trying to carve this one out just to deal with those projects that are in the pipeline. The dispute is the challenge or the alignment is around the term of the net metering credit, and so it is quite common for energy projects to be financed over a 20-year term. This committee dealt with that with Senate Bill 54 a few years ago, supported by the Department of Energy. Last week, you heard testimony on Senator Avard's bill, I think Senate Bill 447, which includes a 20-year term for purchase power agreements. And then you passed on the floor, I think, Senate Bill 221 last week, which includes a 20-year term for PPAs. It's kind of a standard operating procedure. So that's why folks were generally confused or didn't quite understand when the Public Utilities Commission didn't move forward with the 20-year term there. I went back and reread the order last night, and what they said is they didn't think there was a sufficient record to make a decision on extending the 20-year term. Maybe that was because it's such a common financing term for energy projects that the record didn't need to be created, but that's beside the point. That's why we have the legislature to step in and fix problems when the regulators don't quite get it right, and that's what we're trying to do here. I must say that, as I said, if I didn't say it already, I'll say it now. We're happy to work with the Department of Energy to help them better understand this and try to get to yes on this legislation, because it really is consistent with what the legislature did just a few years ago. There was honestly, I didn't quite understand what Mr. Elms was saying about what happens at the end of the 20 years, and that somehow the project's being able to take advantage of better opportunities. I will endeavor to meet with him and better understand it, but I didn't quite follow where they were headed with that. But if there's a unintended problem here, we'll try to resolve it. I should also say I didn't quite understand the Department of Energy's view of just looking at net metering as some sort of a subsidy. I kind of thought that was generally resolved with the VITA study and with the, you know, the general positioning of this, particularly the Senate on this, that, and I don't want to get into details, but we all know that the net metering rate isn't a fixed rate that's there for 20 or 25 years. It's a formula which is based upon market conditions, and so the rate fluctuates. And so, you know, the customers are taking the risk that their net metering rate will be to their benefit. So I don't think it's something that's locked in. And then, to be honest with you, you know, fussing over the 2040 versus the rolling 20-year term, you know, it's the position of the Department of Energy. I think that 16 years is just fine, but 20 years doesn't work. All we're trying to do is make 20 years align with what is standard financing for projects. So I'll leave my testimony at that. I suspect the committee is probably not going to act on the bill today. And so I also add that there's some misalignment in other areas where you've already approved larger net metering projects. And we're also looking into the issue of the misalignment of the 20-year term with the low and moderate income programs. I know there's legislation that you just acted on 221, which expands the low and moderate income programs. We may end up in a situation where those projects have challenge is being financed because there's uncertainty at the PUC on the duration of those terms. So that's something that we might want to take a look at some point, just to deal with aligning traditional financing with the projects. Finally, let me say, I don't think anybody should blame the counties or the individual towns that are coming forward and asking for a 20-year term now when the bill passed in 2021. This committee is well aware that the interconnection agreement problem has delayed many projects, particularly some of the sizable municipal projects. And that's the reason, part of the reason why they didn't spring on locking the rate in 2021, would have been 19 to 20 years. We're finally now just getting to the point where the administrative rules have come. I don't think they even yet out of the Department of Energy. You guys have all heard me say before that rulemaking process has lasted longer than World War II, but we're finally getting to the point where we're going to have a more predictable interconnection problem, which feeds into this issue of why we need to step back in and align the 20-year term with what the actions the legislature took in 2021.
Senator Pearl with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jim, for coming in. I think you've raised some interesting perspectives, as well as I was taking into consideration the perspectives the DOE raised. I guess the concern I would have is maybe if we do this open-ended, it sort of puts us in place that every contract is going to be 20 years from here forward until the legislature or whomever steps back in and changes it. You talked about the projects that are in the pipeline right now, and they sort of were started with the idea of that 20 years.
Yeah.
What would you think it would be reasonable if we put a 5-year sunset on this so that the legislature could review it again in 5 years, and that would give that 5 years for all of the projects that are in the pipeline? That would give them that 20-year guarantee they sort of started with under that. I think that would be a reasonable alternative.
If you're asking for it, it must be reasonable. But I can go back and talk to my clients about this. But yeah, we're really trying to do with the projects that are in the pipeline, and so that's a mechanism to control that. I don't want to say yes now. I need to go back and talk to folks. But
understood, but just something to think about, because I was thinking about what you were talking about, with the interconnection issues and all the things that have occurred in the rules. I understand and I respect that.
Yeah.
And it clearly was the legislature's intent at the time it was passed originally to give 20 years.
Mhm.
And I guess essentially this would give another 5 years of giving that guarantee, and then we could review that process again and see what the outlook is after that.
Yeah. In the spirit of getting to yes, I think it's a suggestion well worth leaning in on. So
Okay.
let me do that and get back to the committee.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing up 221, and we hope the governor does pass and the governor signs it, and we'll protect the 20-year term.
It's going to be a great signing ceremony.
Yeah.
I have lots of locations that you can go do it at. So.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And who else? Do I get anybody else? No, I think that was it. Anybody else want to talk? Want to just sit there and get a nice tan?
I know know, when that sun comes out, Bill,
All
that's
right.
line.
We're gonna close the hearing on this, and I think that's it. We don't have any, what is this?
Can I move exec so we can discuss a couple of things?
Seconded by Senator Pearl, so we're motion to move into exec, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, seeing none? Let's start execing.
Yeah, I wanted to just give a little update onto the progress on a couple of bills.
Senator Warren, she's perfect.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little update on the progress on some of the bills that we heard last week. On Senate Bill 540, which is the portable solar, a lot of good discussion to try to address every issue that was raised in the hearing. You couldn't get a meeting scheduled until Thursday with all the parties involved in that, but that meeting will occur, and I have provided a brief outline of where we might go, and had some conversation with Griffin Roberge and others in terms of utility perspective. So what it would do at this point is looking at clarifying that the 800 watts is AC, because that deals with the issue of loads and the question around that. We're looking at a way of saying that you could have no more than 2 devices at an address, or, you know, somehow a total. I think that people thought the 1600 is where you might start to get, if there were issues, which I think we heard there probably aren't, but if there were, in terms of the size of the load, then that might be a way to handle that. And then thirdly, there was the issue of what kind of registry we're talking about. And I think, you know, the registry idea smacked to me a little bit of overregulation. I think the House would have real difficulties with this, and a lot of people said, well, if I'm going to register, I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to plug it in anyways, which are people are doing now. So what I proposed and had some conversation with Griffin about was, let's say that utilities are enabled to create a program. It could be a check off a box on the bill. Yeah, I've got one of these. That would be very simplified, and perhaps have some consultation with DOE over the program they set up, so they have some coverage as to somebody's taking a look at it. But that might be a very easy way to deal with allowing people to let the utility know they've got one, but without creating the kind of appearance of invasion of privacy and government registration and government registration of things. So that's where that one is at. And there are a couple of little things that I to address whatever was there, and add the UL 3700 standard, which people are talking about coming along. It's not official yet, but to reference that and subsequent standards, so that seemed to put at ease a lot of the safety concerns that might be in the future, that if we added that reference there. So
I think somebody also brought up a concern about the net metering, if they already have a solar panel or solar array, and having these additional things.
That was the utility saying, well, we probably ought to know how much is out there, and that's why I said, okay, if you want to know. And one of the utilities in the state said, we don't care. Another utility said, we care. So that's why I said, well, look, if you care, you can set up a mechanism to find out what people have. The other one was the bill on the conservation commissions, and I've had a lot of conversation with Jason Stock about the wildlife corridors and so on. And I think that what we have an approach now that will address all the concerns about property owner rights and privacy by limiting this strictly to what we already have in statute around transportation project planning. So that for the regional planning commissions will not have an extended portfolio about all things conservation. It would just be when you're doing the transportation projects, take a look at these. For the Conservation Commission, we came up with a phrase that would say that such wildlife corridor and habitat stronghold awareness shall not be used for regulatory purposes, which I think would address what we heard from Jason and also what Senator McConkey was raising. So I'll have both those. They're in drafting, and I mean, I'll have the Conservation Commission one. I have that's in drafting, and then on Thursday I think we'll have the language that's needed there. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope by next week we can at least take a look at these things.
Okay.
So that's the update on those.
Any other things for now? Okay, seeing that, we should be able to exec next week. Okay. All right, and we have the PUC coming in next week. Give a hello. Tuesday, yeah. They just want to say hi to us and tell us what they're
Thank
all
you.
about.
That's great.
And so with that, is there a motion to move out of executive? So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the hearing is now closed. You are dismissed. Thank you very much.
Chris, do you have a minute?
Lovely day.
Oh, I'm Kevin. My brother's backing up.